Are the Dynamo missing Karaskia? Can Ben Olsen coach this team to a win ever again, especially at home in Hell in the Shell, where they really just should not be losing at least? And what are the expectations for the Leagues Cup? This is a Dynamo discussion. I am James Roy, so let's dive in. Hey y'all, James Roy here. I am a new Dynamo fan, just started following this season. This is kind of coming from the level of someone who has just started getting into soccer, so if I say something wrong or I don't get it quite right, that's probably because I just don't know it. Just a disclaimer before we get started. But the Dynamo played 2 games this past week. First up was a 3-0 loss to Minnesota in Houston. I'll say it again. First up is a 3-0 loss to Minnesota in Houston. There's a couple of things wrong with that sentence. Let's start with the first one. Hell in the Shell is in Houston. It is really hard to win there. There's no reason that a team like Minnesota, who's a bottom feeder, should be contending with the Dynamo in Houston. Here's the other factor that affects it. There was 2 hydration breaks during this game. That's because when you play in Houston, it is humid and hot and unbearable. We're playing a team who plays in a home stadium in Minnesota. How is the Heat not an advantage against a team that literally plays in Minnesota? I don't know. Maybe I'm just overemphasizing the advantage that the Dynamo have. But this loss is hard to swallow. It feels like Ben Olsen's missing Karaskia, who's playing for Panama in the Gold Cup. Recently lost the Gold Cup, but won the MVP. So that was pretty good. But that's okay, because even though we're traveling next week, we're going to Colorado, another team that's not very good. So obviously we won that game, right? You would think, but I mean, honestly, expectations going into this game were to at least come out with a draw. But I think that unlike most away games where you're like, yeah, if we can pull a draw, we're good. I think home field advantage in soccer is that important that you kind of go into an away game like, yeah, if we can pull a draw, we really came out on top here. But I don't really feel that way about this draw. I don't want to overreact to it, but with the Dynamo actually being in playoff contention, these are the kind of games where you show that you're a team that can actually contend in the playoffs. And while the score was 0-0, I kind of felt like the Dynamo probably should have lost this game. There was a lot of slip-ups. What I chalk it up to is chemistry. I've said it before. The chemistry on the team has been whack since Karaskia left, and it just begs the question, is Ben Olsen only capable of coaching the team if the ideal lineup is in and they play exactly the way that he wants? It feels like Ben Olsen's making adjustments. And in this particular game against Colorado, he adjusted to try and make sure that, Herrera didn't need to be everywhere all at once because they're at altitude. That's Colorado's home field advantage. There's less air, which seems like an unfair home field advantage being a mile high off the ground, but to each their own. So it just begs the question of all these adjustments that he makes when certain players aren't there or when he wants to give another player an opportunity to not have to be tired all the time. It seems like the team just doesn't react well to these. Is he not running through these in practice in a way that, like, is this like Ted Lasso where they're like, let's change our whole strategy in the middle of the season? And they're like, that's an awful idea. I hate that. I'm Roy Kent and that sucks. And then they just figure it out over the course of the season? Or are we just going to expect to see this team not do well when certain players have, international obligations? Because it turns out soccer is an international sport, and the international game doesn't really, stop and think, I wonder what the MLS is doing right now. Are those Americans doing something that could be a really bad time for us to start a tournament? No, they don't think about that. So the importance of that ability to coach a team through the absence of a person, implement good tactics that give the team a chance for success. I don't see Ben doing that. I don't think it's all Ben. It's been discussed before, but the fact that we have 3 DP slots and 2 of them are occupied by players that don't see significant or really just don't see any player time at all is criminal in a league where Leo Messi just brought over, 2 of his friends to play for Inter Miami. They need like 25 points between now and the end of the season in 12 games, and it's very feasible that they could do it. Both of these games the big word is chemistry. They made me. I watched both games. And watching them all the way through, I just get the impression that all the guys on the pitch just aren't thinking about each other and are just kind of running around. And there's just very few instances where it seems like they're even in sync to the slightest. And so if Olsen can't get them in sync, even without Karaskia there, who's coming back, thank God, then I have trouble believing the Dynamo can push for the playoffs this season. I'm surprised they're as deep as they are in the U.S. Open Cup. We'll see how that plays out. Hopefully, Inter Miami doesn't make it to the next round. But I mean, we just really have to worry about getting past Salt Lake City, I guess. But speaking of tournaments that are not MLS regular season play, let's talk about the Leagues Cup. As I said earlier, I don't think that international schedules regard, the MLS playing at all. But Liga MX and the MLS have both decided to pause their seasons to play in the Leagues Cup. 47 teams just going at it, trying to see who in the world is better. Honestly, I'm pretty excited to see how the Dynamo do in this, but much like the Open Cup, in my eyes, the early rounds in the Open Cup were just like, okay, we'll throw out our second stringers and see what happens. My question is that is Liga Mexico and the MLS going to take this seriously and play serious lineups since both of their leagues are on pause right now, or are we going to see the early runnings be like, okay, well, if our backups can get us through, then we'll start to take it serious later. So I think there's huge potential for this. The rivalry between Mexico and the United States, in some people's eyes, is something that could really be amazing to see play out. And it's nice to see them try and make more meaningful tournaments for U.S. soccer in general. But I'm hopeful to see all the teams actually try, I guess, is my biggest reservation in terms of expectations. I think that the Dynamo, if every team tries like super hard, I don't know if I like their chances, but at the very least, they'll play against some Liga MX teams and they'll, get to see Hector Herrera, and the other team will be like, look, there's Hector Herrera. He's cool. So got that going for us. But yeah, I don't know how to feel about the Leagues Cup yet. So we'll see how it plays out. Well, this has been a Dynamo discussion, and I have been James Roy. If you like this video, you can go ahead and drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And if you want to follow me on social media, it's at N1 Texans Fan on all platforms. And until next time, yeah, stay classy.